Luke, Ethan, will you just please stand up? I think you're here. I heard you were here. Are you not here? Well, to kick it off, I wanted to start by talking a little bit about both of your journeys into really not just even understanding the sport so specifically, but also even just the training process. I know Annette Benning herself went through a year of training for this role, and so I was really interested in the journey that the two of you took in really understanding the sport and understanding the specifics of Diana's actual swim and the training so that you could determine what details felt really important to make sure that when you were in production and you were filming that you were capturing certain idiosyncrasies from it along the way.
Well, I'll talk about Annette first. She, as you said, trained for over a year with an ex-Olympic swimmer, former Olympic swimmer who was her coach, and she was so committed to the role on a number of levels that it was very, very important for her to have like that perfect long distance stroke. And she has a beautiful stroke, as you can see in the film. And I grew up as a competitive swimmer, and I think the authenticity is clearly very, very important for both of us. But one of the benefits of her training was that she, built this incredible endurance, which ended up, coming in, becoming really important because she was in the water 4 to 6 to 8 hours a day sometimes. And even our stunt coordinator, who's done a ton of films, was like blown away, could not believe her commitment to that role. And it really allowed us to actually keep the project film on schedule, because she did all of her swimming and would just stay in the tank that we were shooting.
We had 3 stunt doubles who were like amazing, the best of the best. But Annette was like, no, we can't use them because people will notice, will understand that the stroke, like the way her stroke when she swims looks, will be different. And so it just like, it's a testament to her training for over a year that her endurance allowed us to actually film for what we needed to film. And the script and the way that you've told this story captures this journey of her going through the present and kind of reconciling with elements of her past, and so you're mixing between present and past cinematically. How did you set about making choices of how do we want to use the camera differently for these 2 different motions and these 2 different spaces that the film's telling stories in? It's a good question. I mean, flashbacks are always like a tricky thing in cinema. And for us, really, it was about creating a different look and being very faithful to conjuring like what it was like when she was 15 in Key West, in Florida, and the delight and the passion she had for swimming. And then, not allowing that narrative of abuse to take over her story. It was just one other thing she had to overcome. And we were kind of tired of like men like taking over a woman's story, and so it was a very delicate. I think that's my father, Dad. Dad. Okay, maybe it's not my dad. My dad is here. Dad, wave. So maybe it's one of his PhD students, but it's a good song. I'm just saying. Okay. But you're not forgiven. Sorry. Anyway, it was just about like finding the right balance and treating it with respect, but just having it be one more thing that she had to overcome, not to define her story, because that's a really important thing with Diana. Is like, it was one more thing, and like it never goes away, so you just have to live with it. So it just has to be like over here.
But that, so much of what Diana does while she swims is just she's living in her head. There's memories that are just kind of floating in and out as you're swimming for 50 hours, So we're kind of conjuring her kind of inner life and some of those struggles, and some of it's really positive too, so.
And as she reaches closer to her accomplishment, it feels like we go to the past less and less because she's overcoming more internally through this journey that she's taking herself on. Did you have a sense of kind of how you wanted to structure those moments and going back to that a little bit less before you went into the edit? Or was some of that, because I know you both talked about finding a lot of the structure within the edit.
So the use of archival footage was definitely found in the edit, but it was always a very intentional thing that in the script and in the story is that when there's this rupture in their friendship, after the storm, when everyone almost dies, when Bonnie's like, I've had enough, that it forces Diana to kind of reconcile herself, like to do some work. And she'd been doing this work like subtly through the film, but like it was really after that rupture, and like it's that moment in the hotel when she's giving that speech where she's like 4 times and you always think you'll succeed, which is true. That, we've always felt like that was a moment, and that's why we use the real Diana footage from 1989 where she talks about her abuse, and it goes into that conversation with John Bartlett and then that conversation with Jodie, with Bonnie. And it's more like, I always thought about this film as like she's, for the first, 60%, she's swimming away from something. And it's only once she digests what she needs to do and does the work and like has the hard conversations and like understands that she needs the team, where she's gonna be alone, that she ends up swimming towards something, and that's her future. But she spent 64 years swimming away from something.
And I really love that point. I also wanted to ask about going through archival footage and material, because it's not just a case of what tells a compelling story, it's also visually what's going to fit within the material that we're filming as well. And so